Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today is May 1st and I am doing my updated 2026 U.S. Senate elections predictions video. Now, I just did the 2025 governor elections in Virginia and New Jersey. The video came out just before this one, so after this video, make sure you give that one a watch as well if you are interested in hearing about those races. So for the 2026 U.S. Senate map, it starts out with 35 Senate seats that are up. Before that, 34 seats are currently held by Democrats, 31 are held by Republicans, and the 35, obviously, we have to go over in today's video. Now, the interesting thing about the Senate map is a lot of these states are up in states that have voted very consistently for the Republicans or the Democrats at the presidential level and the Senate level across the last few elections. So a good number of these, we already know how they're going to vote. For instance, the state of Oregon, we know it's going to be a safe Democratic win, as well as the state of Rhode Island and Massachusetts and Delaware. Fully expect these states to all be safe Democrat. We know states like Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota, Oklahoma, Kansas, unless there's a surprise out of nowhere, should be safe. Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, even if Tommy Tuberville does not run and another Republican wins that primary, I fully expect that will be a safe Republican win. Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. All of these states I fully expect to be safe Republican wins. This puts the Republicans at 43, Democrats currently at 38. There are some other states that you can make an argument between being safe Democrat or likely Democrat, but I personally would put in the safe category. Safe meaning more than a 15-point margin of victory. Dick Durbin's Senate seat in the state of Illinois, he is retiring, but I still expect whatever Democrat that wins that primary will probably win the state by more than 15 points. New Jersey, this is Senator Cory Booker's seat after everything he just did with the filibuster speech and setting the record in Washington. Maybe it fades a little bit over time, but I think it's still going to give a lot of enthusiasm among Democrats, and that will keep New Jersey over 15-point margin of victory for him in the state of New Jersey. As for the state of South Carolina, I expect that will be a safe Republican win. The state of Florida, Florida is right around the edge between being a safe Republican seat and likely Republican seat, but Ashley Moody, I think, unless she faces a tough Republican primary challenger, she should be all right in getting renominated, and then I expect her to win by over 15 points in November. That would make Florida a safe Republican state. Now we're starting to get in some areas that I think, again, could be safe, but are probably going to be just under that 15% threshold. And I'm going to start with the state of Montana, where Montana, at the presidential level, we've seen it. It's a very safe Republican state. It voted for Donald Trump by about 20 points in 2024. It voted for Trump by 16.4 in 2020. At the Senate level, however, in 2024, Tim Sheehy just defeated the Democratic incumbent Jon Tester by about 7 points. If you want to go back to 2020, the last Senate race that was up as well, Steve Daines defeated Steve Bullock by 10 points in this margin. So Montana, it really depends on who the Democrats nominate. If it is one of Bullock or Tester, I think this could be under 15 points. If it's not, it's possible it goes over 15 points. For now, I'm just erring on the side of caution, making it likely Republican until we have more clarity on who the candidates end up being. But Montana would start out as likely Republican. The state of Virginia, I think, is kind of in a similar situation. In 2024, Tim Kaine won against his Republican opponent by 8.9%. If you want to go back to the Senate race in 2020, Mark Warner, who was up for re-election, won by 12.1% against his Republican opponent. We just saw the state go for Kamala Harris by 5.8% in 2024. I think Mark Warner is probably the stronger of the two Democratic senators in Virginia, along with Tim Kaine. I expect him to do better than 5 or 6 points. I expect him to probably do over 10 points, but still I think Virginia will not be a safe Democratic win. I think I'll be under 15 points, but not by a large margin. Virginia, I would start out as likely Democrat. As for the state of Colorado, if I'm not mistaken, this is Senator John Hickenlooper. We saw in 2024 the presidential level vote for Kamala Harris by about 11 points. At the Senate level, it's not too different. In 2022, Michael Bennet won by 14.5%. In 2022, in 2020, Hickenlooper won by 9.3%. I'm expecting Colorado to be right around the edge between being a safe Democratic state and a likely Democratic state. In my prediction, I have John Hickenlooper winning re-election by around 13 points or so. getting close to being over 15 points in what's supposed to be a very good night for the Democrats, but still being just a hair under 15 points. This puts the Democrats at 42, Republicans are at 46. The next state is the state of Alaska. Alaska is an interesting state because it's actually voted pretty consistently. In 2024, the presidential race, it voted 13 points for Trump, making it a likely Republican state. 2020, it was 10 points for Trump. 2016, 14.7. 3 straight likely characterizations in a row at the presidential level. At the Senate level in 2022, it was Lisa Murkowski versus Carrie Tshibaka. So it was a special case where it was 2 Republicans, but it was a likely Republican win. 2020, Dan Sullivan won by 12.7 points, also likely Republican. And then 2016, it was safe Republican by a little bit for Lisa Murkowski. So Alaska, I expect, will continue that streak as likely Republican, and I'll put it in there to start right now. Republicans are at 47, Democrats are at 42. The state of New Mexico voted in 2024 for Martin Heinrich by 10.1%, a likely Democratic win. Back in 2020, this is Democrat Ben Ray Lujan. He won his race by 6.1% over Republican Mark Ronchetti. We just saw the Donald Trump lose to Kamala Harris here in 2024 by 6 points. In 2020, Joe Biden won the state by about 11 points, 10.8 to be precise. As for the Senate race, I expect Ben Ray Lujan to win probably by around 8 points or so in New Mexico, which would make it a likely Democratic win. I think he'll do better than he did back in 2020, but I still think it'll probably be under that 15% margin of victory, certainly, and around 10 points or under for the actual Election Day vote. This brings Democrats up to 43, Republicans 47. The state of Nebraska is a really special case on the Senate level because this is really contingent on if the independent candidate Dan Osborne officially declares for the Senate race or not. Reports are he's mulling another Senate run. He's also mulling a run for the Nebraska 2nd District, which is a Republican incumbent Don Bacon, who's in very grave danger of losing his race in this election. So it really depends on what Osborne decides to do. And a hypothetical poll that's been done by Change Research, which is a Democratic poll, but still, Pete Ricketts was only leading over Osborne here by 1 point under the margin of error, which suggests it could become a very competitive race if Osborne is the candidate. Still, we did see a Senate race in 2024 where Osborne versus Deb Fischer ended up being likely Republican by 6.7%. I do believe Pete Ricketts is a stronger incumbent than Deb Fischer, but I would start Nebraska out as likely Republican right now, depending on what Dan Osborne decides to do. If Osborne does not run for this race, I will immediately shift it to safe Republican, but for now I'm leaving it as likely Republican. Next door to the state of Nebraska, we have the state of Iowa. This is Republican incumbent Joni Ernst. Joni Ernst is up for re-election. She is a few potential Democratic candidates. She has one Republican primary challenger as well. But on the Democratic side of things, she has one declared candidate, 3 candidates who could be declaring very shortly. This is in between a solid ranking and a likely ranking, depending on what you're looking at. The main intrigue for me for the state of Iowa was back in 2020 when Ernst only won by 6.5% over her Democratic opponent. 2022, Chuck Grassley won by about 12.2% against his Democratic opponent. Trump just won the state by 13 points in 2024. This is going to be a big question for Iowa. Obviously, farming and agriculture is really important in the state of Iowa, so the economy and tariffs are going to be the #1 concern, most likely, for 2026. If the economy and tariffs stay the way they are now, if they don't improve, that could potentially make this race more competitive than it otherwise would be. If the economy and tariffs get going over the next year or so, then obviously it probably won't be a big deal, and this race should be very close to being safe Republican. For right now, I have Iowa starting out as likely Republican at this time. Next, we have the state of Texas. Texas is another fascinating state where this one, I'm more fascinated not so much on whether the Republican will win, but which Republican it will be. Republican incumbent Senator John Cornyn is running for re-election, and Attorney General Ken Paxton has declared a primary challenge. This is one of the most notable primary challenges in the entire country. President Trump has also not yet endorsed either candidates, though he says that both Paxton and Cornyn are, quote, good friends of his. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this one plays out. I would bet Trump would eventually end up probably doing an endorsement like a week before the primary if the writing's on the wall for one candidate. But this is going to come down to the wire and be very, very close. In the early polling that's been done so far, Ken Paxton has been leading over John Cornyn, but there's still a significant undecided amount of vote remaining that could go for either candidate. On the Democratic side of things, There are a few candidates, or one's already declared, announcement pending for a retired astronaut, but there are 2 candidates who have expressed interest in Colin Allred, Beto O'Rourke, both past Democratic nominees in the state of Texas, to keep an eye out for right now. As for this Senate race, I'm starting Texas out as likely Republican. When you look back at the recent elections, President Trump won it by 13.7 in 2024, 5.6 in 2020, much closer. At the Senate level, Ted Cruz won re-election by 8.5% over Colin Allred in 2024. 2020, John Cornyn won by 9.6%. I think a similar margin probably starts out around that 8-point win or so for the Republicans in 2026. Whether it's Cornyn or Paxton is going to be very interesting. If it's Paxton, then maybe it gets a little bit more competitive and can even get under 5 points given the right environment for the Democrats, but that's a conversation for a later day. Democrats at 43, Republicans are at 50. We're starting to get more into the competitive races that are going to be the main ones to watch, but we still have a few more likely races to go over, starting with the state of Minnesota. Minnesota, this is going to be an open race as Democratic incumbent Tina Smith is not seeking a second full term. We already have a few Democratic candidates declared, including the Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, Peggy Flanagan. Angie Craig, U.S. Representative for Minnesota's 2nd District, just announced yesterday she is running. And Melissa Lopez Franzen, a former state senator, is also running, with another state rep, Melissa Hartman, expressing interest in running. How this Democratic primary is going to play out remains to be seen. It's going to be very competitive, and can't wait to see how it goes. A public policy poll from back in February had Flanagan up by 30 points. But again, that was back in February, so we're going to have to wait and see how that develops. On the Republican side of things, Royce White, the Republican nominee for Senate in 2024, is running again. 2 other candidates, a former Navy SEAL and real estate agent, are also running. State Senator Julia Coleman has expressed interest in running, as well as Kristen Robbins and Michelle Tafoya, the political consultant and former TV broadcaster. There's also a few other potential Republican candidates as well. We're going to wait and see how this one develops. The general election ratings, Inside Elections has this Battleground, Cook, Political, Sabato, Crystal Ball, Race to the White House, all have it as lean Democrat. Minnesota is very interesting because in 2020, Tina Smith only won by 5.2%, but there was also a lot of third-party votes, splitting votes as well in 2020. In 2024, we saw Amy Klobuchar win re-election in a safe Democratic margin, 15.7%, but the presidential race with Tim Walz as her running mate, Kamala Harris only won by 4.2%. As for how Minnesota goes, I think it really is contingent on what the Republicans do. If the Republicans can land a top recruit to run for the race, I don't think Royce White's going to be able to make this race all that competitive. Amy Klobuchar won by over 15 points. I don't think whoever the Democrats nominate, whether it's Flanagan or Craig, are going to win by that much. But I think starting Minnesota by over a 5-point win, but under a 15-point win, is a good threshold right now for Minnesota. I have this race starting out as about 6 to 6.5% for the Democrats right now. This puts the Democrats at 44. Republicans are at 50. 6 Senate races remain. And starting with the state of Ohio, Ohio is really contingent on what the Democrats are able to do on the candidate front, because the Democrats do have potential candidates they could run. On the Republican side of things, the Lieutenant Governor of Ohio, Jon Husted, was appointed senator. This is to fill the seat of J.D. Vance, who obviously is now the Vice President of the United States. Husted has already gotten the endorsement of President Trump, so that's all locked in. He'll be the Republican nominee. On the Democratic side of things, former U.S. Senator Sherrod Brown, who just narrowly lost his seat in 2024, has publicly expressed interest in running again. This would be very, very big news if Sherrod Brown does decide to run again. Recently, Tim Ryan, who's been rumored to be running for this race for a while, has recently declined and will not be running. So maybe Tim Ryan decides to run for the governor's race. I'm doing the governor's video coming out an hour after this one as well, so you're going to want to check that out as well. So I'll be getting an update on that. But Sherrod Brown potentially running in the Ohio Senate race really shifts this ranking, because Inside Elections has this solid Republican. Cook Political Report and Sabato have it likely Republican. Race to the White House has it as toss-up. In hypothetical polling for Husted versus Sherrod Brown, it's only a 6-point race between Husted and Brown with 12% undecided. And I'm making a very big deal about this because at the presidential level, we just saw Donald Trump win the state by 11 points in 2024. He won the state by 8 points in 2020, firmly a likely Republican state. At the Senate level in 2024, Bernie Moreno just defeated Sherrod Brown by 3.6%. So a lean Republican margin, very, very close. 2022, J.D. Vance only won by 6.1%. Going back to 2018, Sherrod Brown won re-election against his Republican opponent by 6.8%. And 2026 we expect will be a good night for the Democrats like 2018 was. The question will it be good enough for Sherrod Brown, now the challenger, to be able to unseat the Republican incumbent Jon Ossoff? All things considered, Jon Ossoff is not as MAGA as J.D. Vance or Donald Trump is, which may be able to help him with some independents and more moderate voters. But the question will be, Sherrod Brown is going to make this race very close. Ohio, I'm going to wait until Sherrod Brown officially declares before making this rating. I'm going to put it as likely Republican for now, but if Sherrod Brown does announce he's running for this race, I would not be shocked if I moved the ranking down to lean Republican, given just how well of a Democratic candidate Sherrod Brown is. It would also likely present the Democrats the last chance at trying to win another Senate seat back. In Ohio, I think Sherrod Brown's the only one that can do it. Whether or not he runs, we'll have to wait and see. But for now, Ohio, I would start out just barely as likely Republican. This puts Republicans up at 51. Democrats are at 45. You could make the argument the 5 remaining states, Michigan, New Hampshire, Maine, North Carolina, and Georgia, are the main battleground Senate seats of 2026. Again, depending on what Sherrod Brown does in Ohio. If Brown does run, you could shift Ohio to battleground as well. But for now, these are the 5 main Senate seats I'm watching for 2026, starting with the state of New Hampshire, where New Hampshire, the Republicans had a really strong opportunity at potentially flipping this race to their side, getting a Republican senator out of the state. However, we do know that former Republican Governor Chris Sununu has officially announced that he will not be running, which really hurts the Republicans' chances. On the Democratic side of things, U.S. Representative Chris Pappas, who represents the 1st District, he is the only declared Democrat right now. Fellow Congresswoman Maggie Goodlander announced she will not be running for this race and already endorsed Chris Pappas. Pappas also has the endorsements of former U.S. Rep. Annie Kuster and outgoing Senator Jeanne Shaheen and Senator Maggie Hassan as well. So the Democrats are really fully behind Chris Pappas and supporting him to be the Democratic nominee. He also has the endorsement of the former governor, John Lynch, as well. On the Republican side of things, things are more sort of wide open. We're waiting on the announcement of former U.S. Senator from Massachusetts, Scott Brown. He has publicly expressed interest in running, both when Shaheen was going to run and against Chris Pappas. Scott Brown, at this point, represents the best chance Republicans have in the state of New Hampshire at winning this race. But again, he's expressed interest. We have to wait for the official decision as well. Other Republicans that could run, Jack Franks, a real estate developers, expressed interest. Potential candidates include Lou Gargiulo, Corey Lewandowski, Matt Mowers, and Stephen Stepanek. Right now, Scott Brown is the only, I would say, candidate on the Republican side that could potentially make this race competitive. But Inside Elections has it as a battleground. Cook Political and Sabato has it as lean Democrat. Race to the White House has it as tilt Democrat. Polling, there's not been any polls done that have Pappas versus Brown. There was Shaheen versus Brown in one poll, so we don't have any polling to go off of for this race. But for right now, Pappas starts out, I would say, as a pretty strong incumbent. He's right around the border between being a 5-point Democratic win or more. So I'm going to start New Hampshire out as lean Democrat for right now until more data and more polling comes out and we get confirmation if Scott Brown is running or not. If Scott Brown does decide to pass in this race and it's Pappas versus another Republican, I think New Hampshire goes by more than 5 points. But given Brown's pedigree as a former U.S. Senator, I think it would be under 5 points, just by a little bit, making it lean Democrat to start out. This puts Democrats at 45, Republicans at 51. The state of Maine with Susan Collins, this is going to be I think, as much as it could be, a very sleeper Senate race to watch in 2026. Susan Collins is running again, and she could face a Republican primary challenger. She is facing a former police officer, but I fully expect that she'll be able to do all right with that, with the backing of national Republicans, and I think Republicans know she's the best chance at winning this race. The question will be, who do the Democrats put up against her? Right now, there's one declared candidate, Jordan Wood, a former chief of staff to U.S. Rep. Katie Porter. Another candidate has filed paperwork. The U.S. Rep. for Maine 2nd District, Jared Golden, he represents a district that's very Republican-friendly and voted for Donald Trump in 2024. He could potentially run. He is currently running for re-election. It really is contingent on if he runs for Susan Collins or not, or for his seat or not, because I think he'd be able to get enough undecided vote and moderate vote that Susan Collins would probably get. He may be able to get enough to be able to flip this race. The question will be, though, he probably is just as moderate and votes with the Republicans almost as much as Susan Collins does in the House. It really wouldn't be that much of a change in terms of Republican versus Democrat in terms of the votes, but it would be a very fascinating race where the Democrats could potentially win. As other potential Democratic candidates, all eyes are on the current governor of Maine, Janet Mills, who is outgoing. She is term limited and cannot run again. She could potentially run for this race, as well as Shelley Pingree, the U.S. rep from Maine's 1st District. This race is going to really be close. Inside elections, race to the White House has it as a toss-up. Cook Political Report, Sabla Crystal Ball have it as lean Republican. I think this is really contingent on what the Democrats can do in finding the right candidate. Because 2026, the election environment should be very good for the Democrats. And if Democrats play their cards right, I think we could easily wake up on Election Day and see Maine flipping to the Democrats. Right now, I'm going to have Maine with Susan Collins starting out as lean Republican. But again, if the Democrats can get Jared Golden or Janet Mills or another Democrat to run and really galvanize support around them, I think Susan Collins is more vulnerable in this election than she was back in 2020 or 2014, which could be a very, very close race. This puts Republicans at 52. Democrats are at 45. So far, every Senate seat that was held by the Republicans or Democrats has been held so far. Next, we have the state of Michigan. Michigan is going to be one of the closest Senate races in the country. This is Democratic incumbent Gary Peters. He is not running for re-election. And we have a wide open primary on the Democratic side right now. Abdul El-Sayed, Mallory McMorrow, and Haley Stevens all are declared candidates, with a few more candidates, Sarah Anthony, Dana Nessel, and Joe Tate, expressing interest in running. Andy Levin, Matt Sard, and Rashida Tlaib are all potential Democratic candidates as well. On the Democratic side of things, that's pretty much it. We're going to have to wait and see how that primary plays out. On the Republican side of things, Mike Rogers, the Republican nominee from 2024, has already announced he is running again. Tudor Dixon, Bill Huizenga, and Lorenzo Sewell are 3 other Republicans who have expressed interest, with a lot of potential Republican candidates as well. Although it is worth noting, Rogers already has the endorsement of Tim Scott and John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader and National Republican Senatorial Committee Chair, who's in charge of getting more Republicans elected. This race is going to be very, very close. Cook Political Report, Inside Elections, Sabra Crystal Ball all have it listed as a toss-up or a battleground. Race to the White House narrowly has it as tilt Democrat. This one is going to be very, very close. Michigan in 2024, the presidential level, voted for Donald Trump by 1.4%. At the Senate level, Elisa Slotkin defeated Mike Rogers by just 0.34%, which ended up equating to just about 20,000 votes. This race is going to be very, very close. The main draw, or the main criticism I have for the Republicans in this race, is typically Republicans don't do as well when Donald Trump is not top of the ticket at getting voters out in states like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. We saw this in 2018. We saw this in 2022. 2026, if I'm the Republicans, I'm a little concerned at getting enough Republicans out to vote when Mike Rogers cannot win on the same ballot when Donald Trump did. 2026 should be a friendlier environment for the Democrats, so I'm a little concerned Mike Rogers won't be able to get more votes out for the Republicans that he would need to get. So that being said, I have Michigan starting out right now as lean Democrat. It's certainly a very close race. It's a winnable race for the Republicans and the Democrats, but I think not having Trump at the top of the ticket is going to hurt the Republicans' ability to get voters out to vote who only vote for Trump, and that'll be enough to give the Democrats a very narrow win in the Senate race. Now we have 2 more Senate races remaining, North Carolina and Georgia, and man, do these Senate races come down to what do the candidates end up being. The candidate in these races is going to be absolutely crucial. Starting with North Carolina. North Carolina, this is going to be Republican incumbent Thom Tillis. He has won 2 very close elections in 2014 and in 2020, both of which were under 50% of the vote that he got. He is open to a potential Republican primary challenger. He has 2 candidates right now, Don Brown and Andy Nilsen, facing off against him. Unless another really high-profile candidate comes in and challenges him, I fully expect him to win the Republican primary. But his biggest problem is going to be the Democratic side of things, where he may be facing off, he definitely is facing off against Willie Nickel, the former U.S. rep from North Carolina's 13th District, who is a formidable candidate in his own right. But the former Democratic governor of North Carolina, Roy Cooper, has publicly expressed interest in running for this race. He won the Democratic governor's race in 2016, defeating Republican Pat McCrory, the incumbent governor, and he won re-election by a likely Democratic margin in 2020. If he were to run for this race, he gives the Democrats a A-plus top-tier recruit at this race and trying to flip North Carolina for the first time in a long time at the Senate or presidential level. The predictions right now, Inside Elections, Sablo Crystal Ball, and Race to the White House all have it listed as battleground or toss-up. Cook Political Report has it as lean Republican. As for how North Carolina has voted in recent elections, 2022, Ted Budd won the Senate race by 3.2%. Tillis won in 2020 by just 1.7%, with, again, third-party vote probably helping him hold on to that race. I want to show you the presidential race as well, where Trump won by 3.2% in 2024, 1.3% in 2020. Just to show you the governor's races from what I was talking about, 2016, Cooper won by just 0.22% against Pat McCrory in a very close race. And then in 2020, he won re-election, by just under 5 points, by 4.5%. North Carolina is going to come down to the wire, and it's really contingent on what Roy Cooper decides to do. If it's Roy Cooper versus Thom Tillis, I'm starting this race out as Tilt Democrat, but seeing as he is not declared yet, kind of with the same logic of what I'm doing like in Iowa and in Maine and New Hampshire, right now I'm starting North Carolina out for Thom Tillis as Tilt Republican against Willie Nickel, but if Roy Cooper wins, Tillis could be in a lot of trouble. Republicans are at 53, Democrats are at 46, one remaining battleground seat, and this is the state of Georgia. And if you thought Roy Cooper was really important for what that race could be, Georgia, we're just getting started. Democratic incumbent Jon Ossoff won a very close race in 2020. He's up for re-election in 2026, and he's probably, along with Tillis, one of the most endangered Democratic incumbents or endangered candidates in the entire cycle. The question will be on the Republican side. Does Governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, decide to run for this race? Without a doubt, Brian Kemp is the most successful Republican in the state of Georgia at running for statewide office and winning. He has done a very good job in the state of Georgia at winning, even though Trump won the state by 2.2% in 2024 and Biden won it by 0.24% in 2020. Brian Kemp won re-election in 2022 by 7.5%. He won a very close race in 2018 against Stacey Abrams by 1.4%. Kemp presents the Republicans the best chance at winning the seat. When 2 elections in a row now in 2022, Raphael Warnock won against Herschel Walker by 2.8%, and in 2020, we saw it go for Ossoff by 1.2% against David Perdue in the runoff election, and Warnock defeated Kelly Loeffler by 2.1% in the runoff election as well. 2026 is supposed to be a good night for the Democrats, and with the national Democratic vote currently in the polls around 2.5% in favor of the Democrats, the Republicans are going to need every bit of help and advantage they could get. Georgia right now, Jon Ossoff, Brian Kemp is going to be very close. If it is Ossoff versus Kemp, I'm going to have Brian Kemp winning by not that much. I'm going to have Kemp winning by under 1 point. But again, same logic as North Carolina. Brian Kemp is not declared, and until he does, I can't in good conscience make that call until he does. So as for the state of Georgia, Jon Ossoff versus other potential Republicans, and there's a long list of them. Buddy Carter, Mike Collins, Marjorie Taylor Greene's name has come up, Tyler Harper, John King, Rich McCormick. This is really going to depend on which Republicans nominate if it's not Brian Kemp. Right now, I would start off Jon Ossoff as the narrow favorite to win re-election as Tilt Democrat, hugely contingent on what happens with Brian Kemp. If it's not Brian Kemp, if it's another Republican that's not Kemp, I think Jon Ossoff wins by more than 1 point. It goes into lean Democrat. If it's Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think it goes into likely Democrat. I don't think she would do too well statewide against Ossoff. But for now, I start Georgia off as Tilt Democrat. My up-to-date rankings for the 2026 Senate map as of today, May 1st. I have Democrats winning 47 seats, Republicans 53, keeping the same composition in the U.S. Senate at this time with some very close calls in Georgia, North Carolina, Michigan, New Hampshire, and Maine, and potentially in Iowa. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to give it a like. Please remember to click subscribe. Leave your comments below. Tell me your thoughts on these very close Senate races for 2026. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to see you in the next video.